Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It
Woohoo!
is Monday, December 9th. That means it's time for the Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by a cast of thousands here. We got up top here David Griggs and David Dorman.
Yes.
Below me in the center square is Matt Sikowski. At his side is John Titella, John Stalika. And joining us down the bottom row there from Bracketeer.org, Rocco Miller. Not doing any broadcast for ESPN Plus tonight, I guess. Got the night off?
Yeah, not today. Just Hoops HD, baby.
It was
Yeah.
HD only. He's got his priorities right, at least.
Right.
Uh,
That's right.
this is our Hoops HD report, and we're going to be going over anything and everything that's been going on in the world of college basketball over the course of the past week. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and pull up the screen share and the workbook. And I figured tonight would be the perfect night to start in the SEC after a fairly good week for this conference, Griggs. Can you call it a good week when you beat the ACC 14-2 in the SEC ACC Challenge?
Two things stick out there. The Kentucky loss to Clemson and the Auburn loss at Duke. And you just got to wonder what is wrong with the SEC. I mean, just coming up short. In all seriousness, Tennessee ranked number one. If you pull them up real quick, you'll see that they're 8-0. And not only have they won games against good teams, have they even sweated yet? Where are they? Oh, there
No,
they
they're
are.
right
Like,
there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Baylor neutral 15, Louisville, a full strength Louisville team, by the way, on the road 22. They're winning games that are not easy to win by a lot of points. And while there are profiles better than that, I would argue that Auburn's paper might actually be stronger than that. On the court, Tennessee's impressed me the most. I think that they deserve the number one ranking and perhaps are the number one overall team. But what's Auburn, right? Were they two or three today? The SEC has taken over the top five of the polls.
Ooh, that is not the right
Oh, and
screen. How
there,
about that
yeah, that's
screen?
not the
That was our
SEC.
under the
Yeah,
radar top 10 from last week. Very wrong screen. Okay.
yeah.
Auburn is number two. And Dorman, let me ask you about that. You've got Auburn at number two, and now we've got Kentucky sitting there at number five, despite a loss uh that lost to Clemson. They did have a pretty good week. I, I think.
I thought Kentucky is that Kentucky had a phenomenal week. Yeah, it was Clemson. Little John Arena was wild, was bonkers, was off the charts for that game. They were ready for Kentucky, and Kentucky came in, and Clemson played their slow it down game. They didn't let Kentucky get out and run and get some open threes, and they never let Kentucky go on a real run. Every time something bad happened, Brownell and his defense really turned it around. Scheffler down low in the middle was awesome. He struggled scoring in the first half. He came out scoring a little more in the second half, but his presence on the floor, the inside-outside game they have when he's down there, Clemson looked real good that night. But speaking of Kentucky, then Saturday night they go out to Seattle and absolutely get boat raced in the first half. They are in huge trouble. They're down 16 at halftime. They're playing without their veteran point guard in Butler on the road in hostile environment. It's in Seattle. Wasn't in the kennel, but was in Seattle. Everyone's rooting. Graham Ike down low, getting everything he wants offensively and defensively. Khalif battles, slamming left and right. Kentucky goes to the half down 16, gets down 18 early, quickly in the second half. Coach makes some adjustments. He decides to go zone. Then he switches it up with a different zone. Then he goes back to man. Bart Pope kept changing defenses on him, and it confused Gonzaga. Then they got ice cold. Everything Pope did was right. I got to say, Calipari would never have done this. Kentucky upgraded in coaching. They won a game they haven't won like this in years. A great game by Kentucky. I'm sorry it took so long. It was going to be my final point tonight. Kentucky played an incredible second half. Great job by Mark Pope. I'm done. Kentucky had a great week.
Yeah,
Yeah. Dorman. I think the stat was that Gonzaga had like 174 or 175 games in a row where they'd been up double digits at halftime.
Never lost.
And there goes that streak too.
Good night.
Sorry,
Yep.
Riggs, go ahead.
I wanted to echo what he said just because it's so worth echoing was the bench coaching from Mark Pope. I mean, we've liked Mark Pope since his days at Utah Valley, but you said that it confused Gonzaga. It confused me. Wouldn't it BYU? Did they ever come out and run multiple versions of a matchup zone?
He was great. Yep, I agree with you.
I
He
mean,
had
in Kentucky this year, yeah, the loss to Clemson. Clemson is a team that's going to beat a lot of top. They're going to win more top 15 games at home. That isn't a bad loss. They've certainly surpassed my expectations. I remember thinking Kentucky was a solid top 25 team that would go 11-7, 10-8 in the SEC and safely make the tournament. This is a protected seed, maybe a 1 seed. They won against Gonzaga in Seattle. And they also have a win against Duke already.
Let's talk about a couple other teams. And Rocco, let me bring you in here on the entire state of Alabama because yeah, Auburn did lose the game to Duke, but however, they bounced back with a win over Richmond. But Alabama had another very, very impressive win at North Carolina by double digits.
Yeah, I think Alabama's just clearly the better team, and that's super impressive because usually you go to the Dean Dome and it almost doesn't matter if you are the visiting team, you're in trouble. But they treated that like they were kind of the North Carolina blue blood, if you will, of the two teams. And I think Carolina's just got a ton of defensive issues. You don't really want to play against Alabama when you're having defensive issues. They kind of tend to just beat the hell out of people. And that's what they did again. And I think they've just got an incredible boost, kind of unexpected, but due to injuries, Labaron Phelan was a big recruit as a freshman, but, coming into a loaded Bama roster, he didn't know how much he would actually get to play. And now he's got a huge role. He was absolutely magnificent in that game, 15 points and 4 assists, 3 steals, really sparked the tide early and often. And that game was never really in doubt. They won it by 15 and had as big of a lead as I think 20 early in the second half. So it goes down as a road win that I'm sure will be quad one, and the Tide are rolling. And you know what? If you don't have a defensive game plan, we saw them lose to San Diego State in the tournament 2 years ago. If it's not a team like that ready to rock fight the heck out of all their flow and offense, despite some of the injuries, like Mark Sears didn't even have that great of a second game last week, but they have so many weapons. They're going to beat you in a million ways. And if you're just going to try to out athlete and play open gym against Alabama, I don't think anybody in the country can beat them.
Well, and what's amazing about this conference that we've talked about 4 really good teams, and we still have another team that's in the top 10 even we haven't got to this week. Matt, the Florida Gators. Yeah, it was at home and against Virginia, but get a dominant win, almost 20 points over Virginia.
They've yet to play a competitive game this year, which I think is a sign of a good team. It's like, regardless who you play, if you keep blowing teams out, you're a good team. Now, I said for them to join the likes of the Tennessees, the Auburns, the Alabamas, the Kentuckys, who will all be probably 1 seed discussion at this point, they've got to add a few more quality wins to their big wins. But that's a team, yeah, that probably is in that back half of that conversation at least.
And beyond that, Titel, we just look again. We're just talking top 25 teams in this conference, and we could probably do about 3 hours on this conference alone. How about the Oklahoma Sooners, undefeated still, along with Florida and Tennessee?
Coach Porter Moser was 12-1 in non-conference play last year. Even in a new conference this year, nation's longest active win streak, 9-0. If you thought there was going to be a drop-off after their title in Atlantis, where they beat Providence, Arizona, and Louisville, you're wrong. Back-to-back wins of 15-plus points last week, Georgia Tech and Alcorn State. They get this whole week off. Then they have 2 more neutral site games. They have the Bedlam game with Oklahoma State in OKC, and then they play the Wolverines in Charlotte. You can't really call them a good defensive team. They're not even blocking 2 shots a game, bottom 20 in the nation. However, you can't really call them a bad defensive team. 10.6 steals a game is top 10 in the nation. And freshman Jeremiah Fears is having a hell of a year. In addition to not losing a game so far in his college career, he went undefeated with Team USA last June while winning a gold medal at the FIBA U18 AmeriCup in Argentina. This kid may never lose a game again.
Looking like it. Stalika, let me ask you just kind of about the rest of the conference, because you look at there in the far right column where the current rankings of the AP and the coaches poll. There's only 2 teams in the entire league here, a 16-team league, that didn't at least get a vote in one of the polls. And those are Vanderbilt.
9-1.
Vanderbilt's 9-1 didn't get a vote, along with South Carolina. But South Carolina did a road win in the challenge, albeit at Boston College. But Sleeka, what about teams like A&M and the like?
Well, Texas A&M also had a nice neutral court win in Fort Worth against Texas Tech, so that's going to help keep them afloat in the rankings for another week, and then getting a solid win at home against Wake Forest and the ACC. Well, I'm not even sure I want to call it a challenge this year, seeing as how one-sided it was. And I'm sure you'll probably say if my team is beating South Carolina, probably a sign that the Gamecocks are indeed going to be at or near the bottom of the league this year.
Greg, you had a thought on him?
Uh, just to
No.
echo my thought was what you had already said. It's amazing that 14 teams in one conference are getting votes in the AP and coaches poll. Is it safe to say one of our researchers, Stalika Teitel, that do these deep dives, that's never happened before ever?
Probably.
Well, how many 14 teams have we even had? 14
Right,
teams
yeah.
have
Yeah,
I
we
I
mean,
feel
even
like that.
had, and we
yeah.
got 14 teams getting votes. That is, this conference is. I don't think there's any doubt what the best conference in the nation is right
None.
now. And uh, but let me get back to our notes here. Norman, here's the upcoming schedule, and we've got some interest. Even though it is kind of a very slow week, we've got couple interesting games tomorrow. First of all, we
Yeah.
get Tennessee, Miami, Arkansas, Michigan. Then
Arkansas,
coming up
Michigan.
this
Woohoo!
weekend, we've got Bedlam, we've got Louisville, Kentucky. We've got a few really interesting ones. Auburn, Ohio State.
You just mentioned many of the great ones. Auburn, Ohio State. Let's see if Ohio State can bounce back. Uh, Tennessee, Illinois on Saturday. The schedule, for those of you that haven't looked ahead, on Saturday is as good as college basketball gets, besides a tournament day. There's, I believe, 10 games that are ranked versus ranked teams. It is an incredible schedule Saturday. And like you mentioned, it just keeps going on and on. With Texas A&M, Purdue on Saturday, Creighton, Alabama. It goes on and on.
All right. So while maybe a slow week getting up to Saturday, this weekend
Yeah.
is going to be a ton of fun here.
Yeah,
Uh,
will be.
let's just get it over with and talk about the other half of the ACC SEC challenge because well, look at all that red on the screen from the non-conference losses early, followed by conference play that actually started off here. And uh, Pytel, why don't we start with this Clemson team because they actually had a damn good week. When you want to talk about the ACC, that in general was bad.
For all the puppets talk about Kentucky, which is very warranted, the one team they've lost to are the Clemson Tigers, who are 9-1. They beat previously undefeated Kentucky. They had a double-digit win at Miami in the ACC opener, and you might have heard that their football team made the college football playoff. They get the entire week off. We're hosting an angry Memphis team on Saturday. Great shooting, 38% behind the arc, top 40 in the nation. Amazing defense, ranked number 5 on KenPom. Same starting lineup has been used all year. 4 seniors and 1 junior, so he's got the veterans all over the court. It looks to me like they're one of those teams that they're not great at any one thing, but they're good at everything. I will have much more on their big man, Ian Shefflin, for my final thought.
Rocco, I want to ask you about this Pitt team because we were just starting to believe in them last week, and I know they bounced back over the weekend with the win over Va Tech, but uh, they got crushed in their challenge game by Mississippi State.
I think it's a tough stretch for Pitt. You know, they go from that tough loss in the championship game a couple Sundays ago against Wisconsin. Then they overcome a pretty much all game deficit to the Buckeyes and win that thing in OT. Then you get thrown down to Starkville, Chad, and I mean it's not kind of an easy trip if you're from Pittsburgh. So you know, of course, you never want to lose by 33. Not good for the metrics and all that. It really sunk them. Like you look at KenPom, they went from 12th to 26th overnight. But then you go to Blacksburg, and that's a Virginia Tech team that is really, you know, one of the probably bottom teams in all of Power 5 right now. But it's a conference opener. It's a home game for the Hokies. Mike Young can coach his butt off, and they got all they could handle there. Found a good way to win. You know, I think overall Pittsburgh's impressed. They came into the year, in my opinion, pretty close to a bubble team, and I think they've been mostly better than that throughout the year. And they just got out of a 5-game stretch against nothing but Power 5 teams. They get a little bit of a break with EKU and Sam Houston to wrap up non-league play at home. that should get them on track because then they'll have a 10-day layoff before opening up the league against Cal and Stanford, if you can believe that.
No, I can't believe that. I don't want to
Yeah.
believe that. So,
Back to back, baby.
Stalika, how about the North Carolina Tar Heels? Now out of the top 25 completely, following that loss to Alabama. And then they didn't look good. They beat Georgia Tech, but they did not look good in doing so.
Well, this was a team that we thought was going to be one of the top two in the preseason, but certainly not looking anything like it during the past couple of weeks, given their performance out in Maui, and now following that up with a tough loss at home in a game they could easily have lost, which is a game that they've also lost in previous years. Granted, not to Georgia Tech at home, but they've gotten swept by bad pit teams in recent memory. Because I know North Carolina, they've played one of the tougher schedules in the country, but they've been a little bit unlucky in that regard.
One team we should definitely be giving a shout out to, though, is Duke. They did beat Auburn. They followed it up with the road win over Louisville. So them and Clemson, I think, are the only two teams I saw this week that did anything for me in this conference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like while at home, Auburn that was still a really good win. I mean, it was a game that I think you would expect a really a top 10 team to beat anybody at home, but still a really good win. The win at Louisville, though, I mean, that was hard to do. I mean, that is a good week.
Yeah. Here's the upcoming schedule. Matt, let me ask you about the upcoming schedule. What are you circling here? We do have some interesting game coming up this weekend, I think.
I'll say, well, Friday, NC State at Kansas. That's one. NC State, they're probably going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, given Kansas this week. But that's an opportunity. And then, yeah, Clemson and Memphis. That's one.
One way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
about that? An
Memphis, Clemson.
opportunity for incarnate word tomorrow. Woo!
I don't have a buzzer
Yeah,
tonight,
I mean,
so.
it's my plus one. I think we already discussed the four teams that look like serious NCAA tournament contenders already, but like if you go beyond that, that's one of those. Hey, NC State, you win that game, you certainly might be a little more of a contender. I say SMU, LSU, that's a big neutral court game that the conference really needs. And then yeah, Clemson holding home court against a Memphis team that has a wild variance of potential outcomes. That could be great and win that game by 10 and could lose by 30.
Of course, circle Louisville, Kentucky, just for the rivalry factor alone on Saturday. Another big game, and Patel, I know you're a big Georgetown fan. Georgetown, Syracuse. Come on, old Big East.
The oldest Big East, Chad, and I would have been encouraged if you had asked me after their 7-1 start with all the games at home, but the fact that they couldn't get it done at West Virginia makes me very, very wary.
I think that's a jump down in level though from West Virginia to Syracuse.
Let's step over to there was another challenge this week. It was the Big 12 Big East Challenge. This one was a battle, and it came down to actually to Sunday's game, where it was Oklahoma State went to Seton Hall and won. I know it was a 9-point final. I felt like more than that most of the game. And Big 12 got the very narrow 6-5 win here, but.
They did. I would say that the Big East still won because no one was expecting this. Anyway, go back.
Well, Matt, I'll go back to you for a second here because one of the marquee games, even though they throw it over to ESPN Plus for some reason, was your Marquette team playing Iowa State. And Iowa State, pretty darn good against what I think is a really good Marquette team that you've got.
Well, that's one. Yeah, like going to Hilton's a very tough task. That's regardless of what Iowa State's record is. The fact that Iowa State's, I think, just as good as Marquette, and that's a tough challenge. I think whoever had home court would have won if that was at Marquette. Marquette would have won by a few.
Yes.
And I'd love to see that'd be a great possible, say, like 2-3 game in a neutral court in March.
I agree with Matt. And just another point, that game was tied up. What didn't they tie it up, Matt, with like 5-6 minutes to go? Marquette showed great heart.
It was about the 10-minute mark. Marquette was down basically the entire first half, 8-12. Clawed back. It was 61-61, about 9 minutes left or so, and then Marquette missed their next 10 shots, and that was
Marquette showed a lot.
I mean,
Marquette showed a lot in that loss. I think Marquette is awesome.
Well, that's what I mean. Chase Ross got hurt in the first half, and that I think what was a tough task already made it a little little too tough. Then yeah, your best defensive player was out, and
And Sleek, I've got to go to you also here. Your Xavier team suffered a Big East loss as well to TCU.
Well, this was one of the series where for the first 10 games, home court actually stood up right here. It was a good result for TCU that had not lost at home all year. At the same time, they were also coming off a couple of neutral court losses in the Acrisure Classic. So at least for one night, they were able to withstand a late Xavier comeback and were actually able to score. I think it was the final 8 or 9 points in the final minute until Xavier got a useless garbage three. But then again, it was not a good day, well, not a good week in the Queen City because Cincinnati also went to Villanova and failed their test.
Yeah, how about that one? That was shocking. That Cincinnati, who, well, Chad, you've been really like, critical of Cincinnati all year, and I think that this proved you correct. It is perhaps Cincinnati's most manageable true road game, minus NKU and I think one other one. And they
Georgia
didn't
Tech.
get it. And who in the Big 12 is going, where are they going to go that's more winnable than that? That is discouraging for the Bearcats that they did not get that one. A Villanova team that has not looked very good.
Well, Rocco, confirm this. You probably confirm this with me. I think Cincinnati is still shorthanded. Am I correct?
Yeah, good question. I believe they are down Day Thomas. Is that right?
Right.
Oh no, he can't. He's back.
Yeah,
Is he back?
I miss. Is it Griffith?
I thought he played in that game. Maybe he
Well,
Did he
didn't.
play in that game? Okay, so
he
if they
played
are
two.
full,
He played like 2 minutes. So
Okay,
okay.
sorry. Yeah.
CJ Frederick is still. Yeah, he's out. He's been out for a week. So yeah, they've got some nicks across the board. I also just think, before that Villanova game, no disrespect to Northern Kentucky or Georgia Tech, but
They're not as good.
Villanova's. Yeah, they're not as good. Dixon's the best player on the court in that scenario. Villanova's, finally starting to figure some things out. We'll talk about them in the Big East, I'm sure. And it was a first real test of the year, and they failed miserably. And Villanova D'd them up really well, and they didn't know how to adjust. And that's just a byproduct of playing so many blowouts. They hadn't been in that situation yet.
And a couple of teams I want to talk about. Maybe we'll say them before we get to the Big East because there were three more great wins by the Big East in Providence, Creighton, and UConn this week. But Titel, I know you want to talk a little bit about one of your favorite teams ever, Arizona State.
I want to is a bit of a strong word, Chad, but they are at the top of the standings, so they deserve it. Coach Hurley lost 18 games last year in the Conference of Champions. It's 8-1, only lost by 8 on the road at Gonzaga last month. They somehow get a relaxing 11 days off before a huge game against an undefeated Florida team in Atlanta on Saturday. As you might have heard, their football team is also going to be in Atlanta on New Year's Day in the Peach Bowl. The Devils have been hot as hell from behind the arc, 39.5%, top 20 in the nation. And it's been done with freshmen. I thought that McDonald's All-American Jaden Quaintance was going to be the best freshman on this team. It's his fellow Frosh, Jason Sanan, or however they pronounce it, because they do not have a pronunciation guide on their website. He's been the diaper dandy. He's shooting over 54% behind the arc.
I want to ask about one other team. And Rocco, maybe you're a good person to ask this. Colorado. I thought it was very impressive the way they beat what I thought was maybe a decent Colorado State team over the weekend. This team have anything? It's in there at 7-2 overall.
I don't think it's one of Tab Boyle's best rosters from a talent standpoint, but he's got a lot of good role player guys. You probably remember Andre Jakumovsky from the Washington State team that went to the tournament second round last year. He's a nice piece. I think Julian Hammond's always been a good piece, and he's finally getting that KJ Simpson role that I thought he would excel in a couple of years back. Now he's a senior. So I think they got some nice pieces. You also have probably, if not the best, a top 5 home court advantage in all of college basketball, just given the great atmosphere, but of course the altitude. And Colorado State, being a front range team themselves, should have been a little more prepared, but I actually just am not that impressed with Colorado State. And Colorado getting to play in Maui, I think, toughened them up too, and that's going to be good for them long term.
Did well in Maui.
Quick look at the upcoming schedule here, Griggs. Big game Thursday with a big Iowa State-Iowa rivalry, and then there's a couple pretty good couple games over the weekend. Cincinnati Xavier among them.
Yes, Iowa State, Iowa. If you're watching this, you are probably aware of this one is more heated than it struck me when I want to say it was Iowa State was ranked second in the nation and Iowa was unranked, and Iowa State beat them and they stormed the court. And I remember thinking, my God, I've never seen the number two ranked teams storm a court after beating an unranked team. That just sort of underlines that this one is tense. It's that one's going to be fun. That's always one that I end up watching, and you just feel the hate coming through the television. It is nuts. It's not a conference game, so you wouldn't think it would get that hot, but wow, it is. I don't know, Rocco, do you concur?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's an interesting one too because I think Steve Lutz is a great coach. They play in a really fun style of offense. And Oklahoma, although they won the battle for Atlantis, they kind of got some breaks throughout the bracket to not have to play. What was it? They did beat Arizona, right? But they didn't have to play
Yeah. Oh, I
Gonzaga.
was talking about
So,
the Cyhawk, not Bedlam. Bedlam is
oh, of course, the
nuts.
Well, we
Cyhawk.
got
Yeah,
both of them
that's
this
easy.
week.
I was going
Yeah.
into. I thought you were talking
Y-
Bedlam the whole
No,
time.
Bedlam makes
Yeah,
sense.
so did I.
which is
Yeah, the
which is
Cyhawk.
also Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, Iowa State is always classic, and I like it this year that it's at Iowa due to the fact that Iowa State's the better team. That
Yeah.
should even up the margin. Should come down to the wire.
Yeah, but my God, they hate each other.
And
Wow.
also circle here Friday night, Arizona UCLA, Pac-12.
Yep,
Yeah.
Pac-12 rivalry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and UCLA a big win over Oregon last night.
Very big.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah, should have won it in a different way. They won it on an ugly shot, but because they collapsed on defense in the last minute. But still, a win is a win, and they're confident. Arizona's a weird team. Tytel can comment there. They're going to beat the hell out of bad teams like Southern Utah the other night, but in their games down in Atlantis, there's some concerns leaking from the Wildcat program. We'll see what they got on Friday.
Let's jump over to the Big East because there are a couple other games from the challenge that we did not yet discuss that we want to discuss on this end of things. And Dorman, let me start with you. Uh, with Creighton, one of two teams to beat Kansas this week, along with Missouri. Bad week for Kansas, great bounce back for Creighton.
Great bounce back for Creighton, and they have a history of taking down top teams at home. McDermott just coached a fantastic game. The shots were falling. Kalkbrenner down low was awesome. The problem was Pop Isaacs, who was absolutely phenomenal in this game. He was hitting everything, and he's playing out of his mind this year. He was really going to be a huge factor in what I thought would be a very successful season for Creighton. He has a hip issue, I believe, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. And to me, that's just a devastating blow. I'm not saying they won't have a successful year. They will. But like this team, in my opinion, had Final Four talent and aspirations.
they
And
did.
I don't know if they have that without that scoring punch. Isaacs' outside shooting is just awesome with Kalkbrenner's inside play. And I think it's a devastating blow, and I feel terrible for the whole program.
Yeah, that's rough. Matt, talk about another team that had a nice bounce back though. UConn with a win over Baylor at home.
Yeah, no, it's a very good week for UConn. I think even more impressive than beating Baylor is, man, they drubbed Texas yesterday. And
Yes.
that's what Caravan actually missed. Their best player, Alex Caravan, missed the Baylor game. They won without him. And then he was back for Texas, and I think UConn is back. And those that want to pour some dirt on the grave, I think it might be a little premature. They were the one team besides Marquette last year that Marquette last week, when I was dooming the Big East, I still felt confident this is a tournament team and a solid tournament team. I think they might be more than that. They might not be a national title contender, but I think they'll be in the talk for a protected seed by the end of the year.
I agree with that. But just one more thought on UConn, and I only say this because I know that our good friend Zach Singer is watching. They did finish eighth in Maui, and I'm going to point that out every week that I know Zach is watching.
Uh, Malika, uh, interesting week for Providence. I thought I was very impressed with their win over BYU, but I think they may have given it all back with the Rhode Island loss.
I don't know that they gave it all back, but there's not much room for error for Providence, given that they went for 0 for 3 in the battle for Atlantis. Getting a win against BYU, a 19-point win, is going to give them a little bit of goodwill. In some respects, no shame in losing against a Rhode Island team that hasn't lost yet. But then again, the Rams had not been really tested, and that was a missed opportunity for a Providence team that, like Xavier, is currently struggling right now and could use all the roadkill they could get going into conference play.
I tell you wanted to speak a
Of
little more
course, I
about
would say the
Butler.
good
Oh,
news
go
for
ahead. Sorry.
Providence is at least you have your star guard back. I think it's Bryce Hopkins.
Yes, Hopkins is
Yeah.
there. Titel, how about the Butler Bulldogs?
Yes. How about that,
And
Taito?
entered last weekend 7-1, then got pounded on the road at Houston on Saturday. But they should be able to take care of North Dakota State on Tuesday, and then a brutal 3-game stretch. Neutral site against Whiskey, at Marquette, and host UConn. Good luck. The Bulldogs have been bullish from long distance, 48% from behind the arc, top 15 in the nation. And the key's been their 6'9 transfer forward, Patrick McCaffrey. He only shot 32% at Iowa in 123 games, but in his first 9 games in Indianapolis, he's shooting 49% behind the arc, which means he will remain the best three-point shooter in the family, even if his brother and assistant coach Connor eventually marries his girlfriend. You might have heard of her, Caitlin Clark.
Big go.
Yeah, I've heard that name. There's no buzzer. I just got free reign tonight. There's no.
Yeah, it's gonna be a couple weeks till we get the buzzer back here. A little renovations going on, but I got that upcoming schedule. We already mentioned some of these games, like the Xavier, Cincinnati, Georgetown, Syracuse, but Griggs, UConn, Gonzaga. I mean, I got to give UConn credit. They are playing a schedule.
Yeah, they are, and I don't. You got to give them credit as much as you don't want to because of our friend Zach. But I agree with the assessment that was made earlier by Matt. They are good. They're I don't think they're going to beat Gonzaga, but they're certainly good enough to do it. And 72 hours out in Maui, where by the way, 2 of the 3 teams that they did play are outstanding teams, is not going to just torpedo their season. They're fine. I still think they're one of the better teams in this league. Aside from DePaul, they've looked better than everyone else by quite a bit, actually.
I think they've looked better than DePaul, but we'll talk about that when DePaul starts playing some real competition.
Yeah.
But,
Well, they played
They
one good
did, and
team
then they
and
lost.
they lost.
well, right, exactly.
Yeah. The upcoming. Oh, are we going the upcoming schedule? Do we?
I'll put it back up on the screen.
Well,
Here
I
for
did
you.
want to
Go ahead.
get Stalika's thoughts. The storyline going into the Xavier Cincinnati game, I think, is that both teams, while it's a rivalry and that will overshadow this, do both teams have a big sense of urgency going into that one to where suddenly both of them kind of need this on paper too, as much as they need it for feel-good bragging rights?
I know Xavier's going to have they better have a sense of urgency. Now, I would say this game's also going to be on ESPN Plus, so the country is only going to be watching this via the internet, and there is not going to be a local hookup like there's been in years past. So I'd have to go into the history books to find the last time that this game was not televised locally or nationally.
That's crazy. Wow.
That is, I do know it was on ESPNU in one of the early years. Happened to be living in Cincinnati at the time, but that was still, I guess, technically national, even though very few households had it. Our household had it, and we had a lot of people in our house that night.
You get a lot of people calling you for your password this weekend.
Yes, true. Yeah.
Step over to the Big Ten here. Rocco, I guess there's several stories here, but why don't we start right at the top with the Michigan Wolverines? I was impressed with the team this week with their wins over Wisconsin and Iowa.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, it started with that road win at Wisconsin. Big first opener for Dusty May in the conference and doing it in the Kohl Center. Wisconsin came in undefeated, of course, and they kind of took that one away late. Vlad Golden had a huge week overall, 24 that night, and then he followed that up in the win over Iowa with a 20-point, 11 rebound performance. And we've known for a couple of years now that not only is Vlad a star in Conference USA or the American Conference, but also now a star in the Big Ten. Danny Wolf, the other acquisition, the big man, they play him together, the other 7-footer. He was also tremendous in that game. 5 assists, 5 blocks, 7 rebounds, and 20 points against Wisconsin. Just a really aesthetically pleasing team, this Michigan Wolverine team. Both on the roster in the way that Dusty can manage the parts, but also situationally. They get into these close games, which now they've played a few. I think they learned a lot from that early loss to Wake Forest, which now looks really confusing because Wake's really not that good. But that is such a valuable lesson when you can lose early in a game like that. It won't really hurt your resume too much. And now they're getting some really big time wins. And again, Michigan was my pick to win this league preseason. Didn't know it would come together this fast, but I think the ceiling's even higher than I did before.
I thought Rocco was out of his mind when he picked Michigan back in October. If you were to ask me today who my pick would be, it would be Michigan. I mean, they've just looked great.
Let's see that looked
Good defense.
pretty
Yeah.
good. Matt, UCLA, we talked about it a little bit already. That incredible last second win over Oregon, but they are 2-0 in conference now.
Yeah, that's why I think, yeah, Mick's got it back. They're playing better defense against this year. Got a little more talent, and that's why I think they're gonna be right up there toward the top two. So yeah, the untraditional Big Ten pick, a team probably don't belong in this conference, but at least geography wise. But yeah, like they're gonna be. I expect them to be right up there. That like their guard play, and I think like I said, definitely upgraded the talent from last year.
Well, yeah, the thing about UCLA, they had that early loss to New Mexico, and I think everybody just sort of they just stepped out of the spotlight and people forgot about them. Now they were playing predominantly home bye games, so why would you be watching them? But I think when we've learned that New Mexico isn't bad and UCLA hadn't lost since, that was a great win at Oregon. I mean, that
Yeah.
to me, that's a statement when that they're a solid top 25 first ballot, whatever team. You go ahead. Yeah.
I said they're basically Florida, just with that one
Yeah.
knock. It probably might be tier one, might be tier two neutral court loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, UCLA is also playing really tremendous defensively, and that's going to win them a lot of games on the road.
Yeah, and you kind of already talked about like some people are saying, "Oh, well, it was a lucky bank shot," but let's not
They
forget
controlled the
that they
game.
what they did for the first 39 minutes and 54 seconds to put themselves in that situation against a great Oregon team on their floor. And they just
Yeah,
played a great game.
yeah. You
It was.
basically you play Oregon even, you get a lucky bounce, you win. But like, I mean, that's why I like the metrics is hey, you basically played even in an environment most people would be 8 points, 8 to 10 points down.
Yeah,
Right. And Oregon's pulled out so many of those where they've been down big at half and they found a way. They were kind of due to get a bad break like that in a weird way. Just because
yeah.
half their wins have been games they were down in.
I guess you're right. Yeah, they have been.
But I tell the other big game this week. What was Penn State beating Purdue? The final score was 11. I think it should have been more than that even.
You are correct, Chad. Coach Mike Rhodes had a losing record last year in his Nittany Lion debut season. He's figured it out. 8-1. They beat Purdue by 11 on Thursday. They were leading Purdue by 27 with 10 minutes left. Certainly not that close. They head to Jersey Chad's Arena on Tuesday to face Rutgers, and they will face Mike Quakers later on in the Battle of the Pens on the final Sunday of the year. Great balance on offense and defense. Their 90 points a game and 11 steals a game are both fourth in the nation. And I know this conference has a lot of great point guards. You got Braden Smith, you got Dylan Harper. I would contend Ace Baldwin Jr. is making a strong case for best all-around point guard in the country. 15 points, 8 assists, 2 steals a game. He's made 50 of 54 free throws as well.
Let's take a quick look at the upcoming Big Ten schedule here. Norman, anything that we haven't discussed yet that you're circling here?
We've nailed so many of the top games. Rutgers tomorrow. How about Penn State at Rutgers tomorrow night at not Jersey Mike's, but at the Rack. Penn State's going to Rutgers. That should be a phenomenal game.
And it is the Rack. I don't care what it says on the floor, by the way.
JMA.
And by the way, Rutgers then getting their in-state rivals there, Seton Hall on Saturday. So that's a huge week for the Scarlet Knights, who really need to find a way to start winning some games and stop losing close ones to good teams, because it's
I
not
know
going to be enough.
Yeah, I know it's a little early to pull out this term. It's a lot early, but if there's any such thing as a December bubblicious game, it might be that Indiana-Nebraska game, where both teams have shown sort of signs of being good, but haven't been as good as they probably need to be. Is that sort of like Xavier Cincinnati? Both teams have a bit of a sense of urgency in that one.
Yeah, and
Big time.
I would also add Ohio State just got Aaron Bradshaw cleared today, and I'm not sure how big of a role he'll have on Saturday, but they've got a crack at the number one Ken Palm team in Auburn in Atlanta. And right now, their best wins are Texas and Rutgers. I'm not really sold on either of those teams. A win over Auburn puts Ohio State firmly in good shape heading into Big Ten play.
Yeah, a win over Auburn would be yes.
And does that
Auburn
maybe
is
start say
remarkably good.
something for Maryland, who has that win over Ohio State already? So
Yeah.
that could help both teams. But
Yeah, the old transitive property,
transitive properties. Yep, transitive properties. Joby's not here tonight, so we could definitely go and talk a little Mountain West hoops. Um, but I don't know that there's much to talk about here.
We can't talk about the Mountain West without Joby. This is not fair.
I know this just does not feel right.
Joby would have loved Saturday's results.
Oh my goodness.
Well, they had two teams that did pick up wins, both in over local rivals: Utah State over Utah Tech, San Diego State over San Diego. Those are, I don't know, are those maybe the only
Beehive?
Yeah.
Well, let me
about the Beehive. How Rocco? Well, Rocco and Titel. Let's talk Utah State, because they might be for real good, like really good.
Yeah, I think, just the ability that Jared Calhoun was able to come in and convince guys like Mason Falslev and Ian Martinez to stay. I mean, he had a great foundation to build with. I think they made some good portal additions on top of those two. But yeah, their offensive rebounding has been tremendous. They don't let teams get to the foul line. They've been a top 50 defense so far. They play at a pretty good pace, but also under control. Obviously, getting that Iowa win.
Yeah.
Hopefully for their sake, since it's a Big Ten win and you don't get many chances like that, carries a lot of water. And of course, they're going to have a great home court advantage all season long, as they always do. So I think they've just got a really good set of pieces. And he also did a great job bringing Eric Hout over from Northern Kentucky staff. And for those not familiar with Under the Radar, he's been the best defensive assistant coach in the Horizon League for about the last 5 years. So he's got a really sweet mix of offense and defense on that coaching staff.
They're tough.
Maybe worth discussing also. The New Mexico sitting there 7-3. They are one of the three teams that did not lose a game this weekend in this conference. Also,
odd season for Richard Pitino. He's got neutral site wins over UCLA and USC. He's got a road loss to his dad at MSG, a respectable 3-point neutral site loss to ASU in Palm Springs, and then this horrible overtime loss to New Mexico State last Saturday. He blew a 14-point lead in the first half, and he overcame a 15-point deficit in the second half, only to lose in overtime. They continue their tour of the land of enchantment by hosting Western New Mexico on Saturday, then VCU, who destroyed my Quakers tonight on December 18th. They're getting killed on the perimeter, 39% allowed behind the arc, bottom 20 in the nation, but inside they're great. There might not be a better international frontcourt duo than Mustafa Amzil from Finland and Nelly Jr. Joseph from Benin. 28 points, 17 boards, 3 blocks combined.
Yeah, here is the upcoming schedule for the week. And honestly, when you look at this, Stalika, maybe the one game that I would have circled earlier this season is Boise State St. Mary's, but Boise's been kind of disappointing so far.
Well, Boise, we already mentioned that they fell behind against Washington State. Couldn't quite dig up all the way out of that hole, and they end up losing that one. But I figured you'd be highlighting Monday's game because we have a front range game with the Air Force traveling to Northern Colorado.
Air Force, Northern Colorado, more important than any of those other games.
Am I right? Big front range game.
Let's clear that over there. Let's jump over to real quickly over to the West Coast Conference. We talked a little bit about Gonzaga already with the Kentucky game, but Matt, maybe a little discussion about St. Mary's, especially with that win at Utah that they picked up over the weekend.
Yeah, another big win for them away from home. I really liked that team when they were playing in the Acashire event. I caught most of both their games, but that 9 to 11 o'clock Central is right in my range of off of work, not asleep yet. Can get some good hoops if it's not in the DVR.
And now if you want to bring up here, Titel, I know you and Rocco both have comments on them. Let me start with Titel, though. Washington State, sitting there
Yes.
practically in second place in the standings. Time to start paying attention?
Yes, I'll save some time for Rocco as well. New coach David Riley brought his whole team with him from Eastern Washington. He's 8-2, back-to-back wins over Nevada and Reno and Boise. Despite his leading scorer Cedric Coward out due to impending shoulder surgery, they get the whole week off. They host Missouri State Saturday, then they head to Seattle to face the hated Huskies on December 18th. And as far as other former conference and champion teams, you want to know why my Wildcats are having an off year? It's because of their lack of in-state recruiting. Two of the Cougars' top four scorers, Nate Calmese, Gilbert, Arizona, Dane Erikstrup, Chandler, Arizona. Come on, Tommy Lloyd.
Rocco.
Interesting point on Calmese, because I actually talked to some Southland coaches over the weekend. You know, he was only recruited to Lamar for his freshman year, where he broke out and averaged around 17 a night. Then Washington, of course, brings him over. He ends up winning the Apple Cup last year at the game I covered in March, and stomps on the logo after the Huskies beat the Cougars, only to go in the portal and commit to the Cougars a couple weeks later. Welcome to modern day college basketball.
Oh,
And now he's killing it for the Cougs. He's a great player. Lawan Watt's also been awesome. Titel, and they're not only playing without Coward, they're also without Favors, Wilson, and Wynot. They're basically rolling with 8 guys. But it's one of those weird deals where when your rotation is forced to look a certain way, sometimes it can enhance your defense. Sometimes those guys can click a little faster because they don't have to worry about being subbed in and out and going 9, 10, 11 deep. And it's obviously working so well for the Cougars. They had a 44-24 lead in that Boise game at half, held on, of course, to win by 5, another giant lead in the Nevada game. And the reality is right now, you know, they'll get that Washington road opportunity the way things are. They probably be favored to win that. The Huskies don't look good at all. And they get a Northern Iowa game on a neutral court, which is another good resume builder. Northern Iowa blew out a couple teams last week. Right now, you look at the strength of resume, as Chad had pulled up, 45th in the country. That's getting really close to where the committee would like it to be. Top 40 would be preferred for a WCC, and they're 83rd in conference strength of schedule. Not only did David Riley do an aggressive job on the schedule, but he's done a great job with the team. This really gives the WCC some legs to get a third team in.
well, it's even more impressive than 45 in SLR, 31 in wins over Bubble.
Right, and that's gonna be a factor this year. Great call, Matt.
The brand new WAB stat there, by the
I
way.
love that metric.
Wins above the bubble. We'll do a show in a week or two here where we dissect it a little more, have a little more data points on that thing. That might be something we can look
It's
at.
a great metric. Yeah, I almost think they should use that as the sorting tool instead of the net.
Here's the upcoming schedule.
I'm waiting to see how it affects like the super conference teams though before I get too excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good wins to be had in those leagues.
Sunday night, San Francisco is going to play Loyola, Rocco. That is
I will
going
be
to
there.
be
I will be there.
That is going to be a fantastic game. I think both teams are very underrated so far this year. Both programs are in a great place.
Yeah, it's
How
exciting.
neutral is that game?
It's a Milwaukee game in Fiserv Forum. We got a triple header.
Oh, well, that's right. I forgot that. A non-Marquette MTEs at the Fiserv.
Yes, we got Milwaukee versus Akron, and we got G-Tech versus Northwestern. I actually think the Dons versus Ramblers is the best game of the day.
By
awesome.
quite a bit, yeah.
Well, Milwaukee Akron will be great too, but we have to save that for Wednesday.
Yeah.
Tell you what, we're talking a little Ramblers. Let's jump right over to their conference here, the A10 or the Blurs, as they like to be called now, the apostrophe BLERS.
I can't get on board with that. The Blurs. Oh God.
Yeah,
the Ramblers. Okay.
The Ramblers. 2 undefeated teams that we talked a little Rhode Island earlier also. But beyond them, Pytel, St. Bonaventure at 9-1.
They beat a couple of cupcakes last week. Their only loss, 5-point neutral site to Utah State on Thanksgiving. Very respectable. They get the whole week off. They face Providence, unfortunately for them, with a healthy Bryce Hopkins at Mohegan Sun on Saturday. If they can win that one, 2 more cupcakes next week, they could be 12-1 when hosting VCU in the conference opener on New Year's Eve. Circle that one. The defense has been great. 60 points per game allowed, top 15 in the nation. The key on offense, Chance Moore. The guard began his career at Arkansas. He's a decent double-digit scorer at Missouri State over the past 2 years. exploded this year. 16 points, 7 boards, 2 steals, 2 blocks a game. He does it all.
I got this over here. Salika, maybe ask you about this. St. Joe's over the weekend took home a championship, won the Big Five title, beating LaSalle in the championship game. But is that kind of an indictment of where Big Five basketball has kind of fallen off to these days?
I was about to say this might be the weakest Big Five champion I could remember in recent time. Let's not forget the Hawks have lost at home to perennial powers Central Connecticut State and Princeton, and this is not, frankly, one of the Tigers' better years right here. I mean, at least I suppose you can give credit for St. Joe's. At least they beat Villanova while the Wildcats were down. They managed to catch them at the right time, at least.
Well, Greg, Central Connecticut will probably be first place in the A10 right now. They've beaten St. Joe's, they've beaten UMass on the road.
Yeah.
They're running through the league.
Yeah, they are, which is praiseworthy of Central Connecticut, and very critical here of the A10. And Rhodey did have the nice win against Providence. Loyola, one of the things that's kind of been disappointing about this league collectively, we talked about this last week, is the overall strength of schedule or lack thereof for a lot of the conference. Now, one of the teams that has played a good strength of schedule and that does have, I think, a really good win against UConn, a nice win against Northwestern, and two very, very solid showings against North Carolina and Iowa State is this Dayton team. Granted, you look at that profile and it's a lot of tier 4 in Northwestern and UConn, but they've got
look at their next
Marquette.
3 games. Yeah, look at the next 3 games.
This is a team that went out and scheduled unlike the rest of the league. And I really think that this Dayton team is good. And I'm starting to wonder, why isn't there more love for them in the polls? What's not to like? Like who in the A10 has outperformed them? No one. It's not even close.
It's an A10 team with 2 losses right now. That's the problem. Now, if they're an
Yeah,
A10
but look
team
at who. I mean, is that your general assessment, or are you saying that's why they're kind of?
Oh no, I'd say that's why they're not. I think they're a pretty good team. I think that's why they're not ranked. Is that if you be an A10 team with 2 losses right now, you better have about 4 Q1 wins to the good column.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, Iowa State and North Carolina are pretty good teams.
One more team, real quick, Rocco. I know you had a take on George Mason.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because if you go even before the Maui Invitational and you run numbers on the league, George Mason's been the best performing team, even better than Dayton, mainly because they've just been elite on defense and getting to the line and doing a lot of little things to win. And that even includes the Darius Maddox injury, which he just came back from. And I think they've just done a really nice job recovering. They had 2 1-point losses, of course, that ridiculous Central Michigan buzzer beater game, and the setback against East Carolina, which was, I think, a 1 overtime or 2 overtime loss. So resume is already in trouble just due to 2 really bad luck losses. But this team, I think, can really compete when we get to league play. Braden O'Connor's looked really good. Jalen Haynes had a double-double in a blowout over Tulane, ended up being a 12-point win at the end. But they were up by 20 early. And I really like this pickup off the bench right now, Giovanni Imijuru. He came from Siena, and Sam Houston before that was a really good MAAC player last year. All these guys are between 6'4" and 6'11", so they're very difficult to score against. And Tony Skinn's just done a really nice job getting those guys to gel after those 2 heartbreak losses, and they're really pounding people right now. And so they get a week off, and then we get to really see what they're all about next Tuesday when they go to Cameron Indoor.
I said their margin of the Marquette loss, that game was not that close, not that lopsided. It was a close game most of the way.
So
yeah, they're coming into the top 80 on KenPom right now, but I think that's going to keep getting better the way they're playing.
So Rocco and Titel, our selection committee guessing experts, you look at this and you see a lot of bloated records, but it's bloated out against weak schedules.
Yeah, like Rhode Island.
How many bids are there? Like, what kind of room? How much room is there for error, and how many teams can get out of this and get inside the bubble? Because other than Dayton, no one's really done anything.
Rocco can start.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I just think, right now you've got those great records with Rhode Island and Loyola Chicago, but until there's some substance to the resume, which includes winning games on the road and picking up some important neutral court wins if you have them. So Loyola Chicago against San Francisco will be really important. It's really just not a lot of substance yet. They're going to have to win quite a bit of conference games and away from home. But it's better than losing any games. Obviously, I think St. Bonaventure's done pretty well for themselves. But again, a lot more to prove. VCU, took a couple losses. You hate to see that, but they've got plenty of chances with that schedule, including the road game at the Pit. Overall, I think the conference is better. You got maybe 7-8 teams that are top 85 worthy. And I think last year at this time, maybe half of that existed. So that should help if they can eat off each other. And you got to take care of those bottom feeders when you play them in league play. But I think overall, it definitely seems like a multi-bid league to me. What do you think, John?
Yes, I would set the over-under at 2.5, and I think I'd take the over, but it depends on which metrics you like. Like, Chad, if you look at the J&G column and the Torvik column, like right now, Rhodey is so far ahead of VCU, but in 3 months, I think VCU is going to be so far ahead of Rhodey. Like, we don't know. Like Rocco said, you have to win all those conference games, which it's simplistic, but like if one of these teams wins 25 games, I'm pretty sure they're going to get in. If they only win 20 games, I'm pretty sure they're not going to get in.
I'm worried about Rhodey at Brown tomorrow. Brown's beaten them 3 times in a row.
That was one of the games I wanted to highlight
rivalry.
Rocco. Also throw
Ocean State.
The Ocean State.
Rhode Island beat Providence. Brown beat Bryant the other day. This is the Ocean State championship game tomorrow night.
Oh my God! Are you bringing the trophy?
The Ocean State tournament, the fake tournament that we invented.
But we
have
an even bigger game tomorrow night.
Oh yes, oh yes.
It is the battle for the greatest trophy in sports. I don't know what it is. I don't think I want to know what it is.
It is. That is. Oh my God! I am amazed.
Garland and Davidson for the Hornets' Nest Trophy. Yes,
that is a work of art, an absolute beauty. It belongs in a museum.
So those are the 2 games. Tomorrow night is the big week this week in the A10. Real quickly, one last conference. The American, with the story had been Memphis all season. Norman, not a good showing yesterday by Memphis.
Not a good showing. They took it on the chin. They just looked like they weren't interested last night at home. The crowd wasn't into it like they usually are at FedEx Forum, and it was a lazy effort. And offensively, I thought they were settling for bad shots, and it didn't look great. But on the other end, Rocco and many on this panel, as we were talking about before any game started, a lot of us, not me, but a lot of you guys said Arkansas State, watch out for this Arkansas State team. You are right. This Arkansas State's a really good basketball team. They're well coached. They take smart shots. They know what their rotations are on defense, and they outplayed Memphis from the go. Last night, they were never losing unless it was in the first minute or 2. They took Memphis to the woodshed last night, and that's a good basketball team.
Oh, yeah. Arkansas State's deep athletically. They finally started putting it together, but that was even with, they were missing Darian Ford was out for Arkansas State, and then Terrence Ford went out around halftime for the rest of the night. So Arkansas State did all that shorthanded. Kind of shows how deep it kind of shows how deep they are. But Memphis themselves, they did a brutal. I mean, they don't take it easy on themselves by any means. They played La Tech before that, which was risky, and that game was tied with about 5.
They won that one, yeah.
They
won that out, yeah. And I mean, listen, I think Memphis will be better for it. Obviously, and you got to hope Arkansas State can play into the top 100 now. But man, do they really test themselves? It's crazy. I think they played like 3 or 4 Power Fives in a row now. Memphis.
Their next game this weekend is at Clemson.
Their schedule is tough.
Yeah, at Virginia, Mississippi State, Ole Miss.
That's right. Yeah, so you win two of those 4. I mean, they're still in great shape.
There's the rest of the upcoming schedule. Wichita State at DePaul. Briggs. Wichita State is 8-1.
Boy, the one they should really that should have counted as about 2 or 3 losses. They got pounded so bad. But
Yeah, that was their loss to Florida. It was to Florida. It was a good team, a very good team actually. So
much better than Wichita that day. Wow.
and any day
John
probably.
Chaney would be spinning in his grave if he saw who Temple is going to be playing on
Yes.
Tuesday. If you want to talk about who basically set the standard for the toughest non-conference schedules, I don't think Holy Family qualifies.
Yeah.
No? No, no.
But then they're going to Hofstra on Sunday.
Where is Holy Family, Stalik?
I
This
don't
one
know.
I couldn't possibly tell you. It sounds more like a local
Yeah.
parish.
You know everything.
Yeah.
While Slinka finds that out, let's go to final thoughts here. Tell, let me start with you. I got the screen share up. I know you need it.
So I mentioned Clemson earlier, and now we got to talk about their big man, Ian Shefflin. I got to see him play in person last March on opposite ends of the country. So he was in DC for the ACC tourney. He only had 5 points, and the Tigers got blown out by BC. Then I went all the way to LA to hang out with Rocco, of course, but also to watch him score 14 points while beating my Wildcats in the Sweet 16. And then he had a double-double in a loss to Alabama in the Elite Eight. Last Tuesday, he took it up a notch. Against Kentucky, a career high 20 rebounds. The Tigers got their highest ranked non conference home win in program history. And he's now the first Clemson player with 20 rebounds in this millennium and leading the nation with 12 and a half boards per game. He's not like 7'3", 300. He's 6'8", 225. Very impressive rebounding effort.
Very impressive. Real quick note: Holy Family is right there in Philadelphia, so
Thank you.
local team.
Now,
So,
is it a college? Is it a church? Is it?
Yeah.
Holy Family University. It's a private Catholic school. Salika, got the screen share up. I got one for you here also.
Well, it's the crosstown. Yeah, it's the week of the crosstown shootout, but I think the biggest headline is actually taking place several hundred miles down south in Cheatham County, Tennessee. So this is a middle school who had named themselves the Bearcats and had also modeled their logo after Cincinnati. One small problem: University of Cincinnati sends them a cease and desist, probably because they had not acquired the rights to use the logo, but fortunately for Cheatham Middle School, there's a company with Xavier ties that has volunteered to step in and say, if you change your mascot to the Musketeers, we will be more than happy to help you design a new logo. And we find out today they have accepted the offer. So this is certainly going to be a victory on the Xavier side early on during crosstown shootout week here.
They had the C with little stars on it, just like Cincinnati does. That's on that
And now they
screenshot
can
there.
have either the Running Man logo or a variant of the Musketeer mascot at their disposal.
I've always appreciated the Xavier Cincinnati rivalry, but never more than I do right now. Like they're fighting over middle schools, and that is incredible. That is great stuff.
Go ahead and pull this down here. Let me run to final thoughts also. Matt, you're up next.
Well, I was the great segue out of that because my final thought is on rivalry games and then on a conference and the heat on them. Like, and some of it depends what's happening. And then because we had a good discussion on the Marquette board today about Marquette, Wisconsin. Like, not quite as heated now. The coaches generally get along, and that fans still don't like each other, but like that. But still, a rivalry that got some heat injected to it now. Is Griggs will enjoy this. The border war is more of a war now after Missouri beat them. That's a game that's gonna be a whole lot more interesting the next couple of years. I think Deskate's doing a pretty solid job at Missouri and he has them competitive. And it feels like Bill Self's losing his fastball just a little bit to where, hey, that might be competitive these next couple of years and really feel like a war and not just a border exhibition for Kansas.
Yeah, the temperature of that rivalry, other than maybe BYU Utah, when it was a conference game, I don't know if it was the biggest one. I do think it was the most bitter. I can't even explain the hatred in that between those two. I think that had kind of died down some when they quit playing, but then again, maybe not. That may have been Mizzou's most feel-good sports moment, at least in basketball, in a long time, beating Kansas. And one of the questions is, with it not being a conference game anymore, will Kansas keep it going?
I don't think if you got it going back, I think they'll keep it
It
going. I
was a
think it'll be
six-year
about
contract, which
conference
is
day, yeah.
lengthy. Yeah.
Let's go through a couple of them here. Rocco.
Yeah, I mean, you guys touched on it with Mizzou. I was going to say a few things there. I just think, the larger story to me, obviously it's huge locally, and you're right about that. That made their year probably. But with Kansas losing twice last week on the road, and Missouri doing what they did, pretty much outplayed them throughout the game. That what does that say even more about the SEC? I mean, at the end of the year, we might look back and Missouri's like what, the 13th best team out of 16,
And then
and
right on the bubble.
they
I'd
they're
say they're a
probably
7 seed, but
Yeah.
yeah, 7 seed in the what the I don't know like somebody's got to lose games in this league. Like you've got 60 what is it 16 teams and eight of them are going to be under 500 or below. So if Missouri's 13th best, they're probably going to lose a lot of games. But it just shows like how crazy deep the SEC is. That was my overall thought on the outcome. And Tamar Bates going for 29, that was a big performance for him. Also in the SEC with Tennessee, I mean they're knocking it out of the park with the metrics. You got Jordan Gainey, Justin's son. He really finally looks like an SEC player this year. He's playing terrific. Chaz Lanier, there was a lot of scrutiny over him coming out of North Florida and demanding all that money out of the portal coming from the ASUN. He's lived up to every penny of that offer, whatever the offer was. And Igor Milicic, just tremendous out of Charlotte. We liked him a lot in the AAC. He's made the leap. Tennessee, Dalton Connect last year. Whoever's running their portal department's got to win an award because this is an incredible haul that they brought in the last 2 years. And then lastly, West Virginia. I know we talked a little bit more about them last week, but with those wins over Gonzaga and Arizona, watch those things age pretty well over the course of the year. With the Big 12 not being the best league this year, I think that's going to be really critical for them. But they're also playing a top 20 defense. They're a top 20 performing team so far. And, I really think with that defense and a slower tempo, and of course, you've got Tucker DeVries there, an all-star. This team could finish like top 8 in the Big 12, maybe even top 5 if it keeps going. So I just think overall, I'm really curious to see how West Virginia does long term.
Point. Norman.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out to a couple of Big Ten guys. Going to start out east for Maryland. There's a freshman. His name is Derek Queen. He's from the Baltimore area. Went to Montverde Academy for high school and basketball. This kid is playing phenomenal basketball. He is awesome. If you get a chance to watch Maryland, this kid does it all. He scores, he passes. Seems like his teammates around him really likes him. He seems like a likable guy off the court. There was huge hype coming in on this for him, and he has lived up to it. Get a chance, watch Maryland. They are Derek Queen is a stud, and the second one is a little local flavor here in the northern suburbs of Chicago. Northwestern, Nick Martinelli is a stud. This kid does it all for Northwestern. I say he's a local kid. He went to a high school right next door to me. Glenbrook South High School. And he scores. He's average 20 points a game. He's getting about 6-7 boards a game, couple assists. He's all over the place. He just does all the little things. Northwestern they were down. They were 0-1 in the Big Ten. They lost the last second buzzer beater to Iowa during the week in Iowa, and had a home game against Illinois, a very good Illinois team. I think a talented Illinois team people are sleeping on. And Northwestern was down 6-8 most of the second half, had a great comeback, sent it to overtime. He scores 7 in overtime. Northwestern turns that loss into a win. Instead of sitting at 0-2, they're 1-1 in the Big Ten. I think this Northwestern team is solid, hangs in the Big Ten all season long. And those are two kids doing a really great job early in the season.
Absolutely. Griggs, you want to finish the show off?
Yeah, a team we didn't talk about, and understandably so, was Houston. They were my preseason pick to win it all. And while they may have underperformed a little bit, I still think that their ceiling is every bit as high as it was. And when I say that they underperformed, they lost to Auburn I'll be on a mostly but not entirely home court by 5. A really good win for Auburn. Alabama in overtime, neutral floor. San Diego State in overtime, neutral floor. And after that, they just blew Butler, who we kind of talked about earlier, that's having a decent year, into the sun. I think Houston, while they're sort of out of the spotlight and laying in the weeds because of some of these early results, is still about as good as anybody in the country, or at least has as high of a ceiling. And when I look at their next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, their next like 13 games, I think that they could win them all and maybe win them all in dominant fashion before going into Kansas at the end of January for what would be a massive showcase game. I'm still a believer in the Cougars, despite the slow start.
I agree with you there completely.
Yeah, and one more final thought. We kind of talked about it is just not a busy week this week. I always hate this week. There aren't a lot of games, a lot of it due to schools being in final exams. I never understood what academics had to do with college basketball. Why do we have to have academics? Can't the people in the athletic departments that work in
Buzzer got
academics
to make the buzzer
get
work.
together and get rid of these final exams so we don't have to have a dead week like
Buzz,
this?
buzz. Does that work? No. I do want to thank everyone for joining us. On behalf of David Griggs and David Dorman up here, Matt Sikowski, John Titel, Rocco Miller, check him out at bracketeer.org. Uh, I thought that was supposed to be John Salika down the bottom. Doesn't quite look like him at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
Chad
Tom
Sherwood.
Izzo.
Chad Sherwood.
Oh, geez.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be back with an Under the Radar later this week and next week for another Hoops HD report. Talk to you again real soon.